Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2014 Import Permit Program webcast, brought to you streaming live from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Import Permit Program in Atlanta, Georgia. I am Lourdes Mueller. It is a privilege to introduce today's webcast. Our purpose is to provide beneficial information on and guidance about the Import Permit Program and the permitting process to our nationwide users. We will provide new information on the key components of the import permit regulations and processes. We are very pleased to have guest speakers from the Customs and Border Protection, the Department of Transportation, and the USDA APHIS. We are very happy to have CDC speakers from the Division of Global Migration and Quarantine, the Select Agent Program, and our very own Import Permit Program staff. Today's speakers, according to the order of presentation, are listed and shown in this slide. Von McLee is the Chief of the Program Services Branch that includes, among others, the Import Permit Program at the Division of Select Agents and Toxins. The IPP oversees the implementation of the import permit regulations. In keeping with the available technology, Von McLee is promoting progress for the program. This afternoon, he will give us an overview of the import permit regulations. Glenn DeGrew is the Import Permit Program Inspection Coordinator. He will walk you through the inspection process as well as provide valuable information and guidance on what to expect and how to prepare for an inspection from the Import Permit Program. New to this year's webcast, Susan Loring. She is a microbiologist from the Select Agent Program. She is the Division of Select Agents Facility Specialist. She will talk about the verification requirements that an entity is expected to perform and document for BSL-3 and ABSL-3 laboratories. Also new to this webcast is Dr. Adam Langer. He is the Importation Personnel Contact Team Lead at the Division of Global Migration and Quarantine. He will provide us an update on the importation of selected animals, animal products, as well as CDC's operations at the U.S. ports of entry. Our very own Miranda Bradley is a technical reviewer and inspector at the Import Permit Program. She will brief us on what is new with the Import Permit Program. New speakers, Dr. Deborah Duffy and Dr. Shirley Wager-Pagier come from APHIS USDA. Dr. Duffy will talk about the import and interstate transport of organisms and vectors of infectious diseases of livestock and poultry. Dr. Shirley Wager-Pagier will discuss pest permitting policy in protecting American agriculture and environment. Still another new speaker for today is Dr. Romelito Lapitan from the Customs and Border Protection. He will present border management and control of imported materials. And our final speaker, who is also new this year, is Bill Stevens of the Department of Transportation. He will discuss DOT's safety regulations and requirements for transporting infectious substances. The order of today's Webcast presentation is shown on this slide. There will be a 15-minute break at 2:45 Eastern Standard Time, and the session will resume promptly at 3 o'clock. After the speaker's presentation, we will open up the lines of question and answer session. Miranda Scott will preside. A panel of subject matter experts will answer questions. Then our Deputy Director, Mark Hemphill, will give the closing remarks. Some useful tips, housekeeping tips. The webcast is one-way audio only. But at any time during the presentation, you may send your questions to ipwebcast@cdc.gov. We will respond to the emailed questions during the question and answer session following the very last presentation. Answers to questions not addressed during the webcast will be sent to you, and also the slides and video of the proceedings will be posted on the CDC Import Permit Program website, shown on this slide. Please contact your IT department if you experience any type of technical difficulty. I will introduce the first speaker, Von McLee. As mentioned earlier, he's the chief of the Program Services Branch, which the IPP oversees the implementation of the import permit regulations. He is going to take us to the next level. He will talk about import permit regulations.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Mueller. And I want to start by giving a special thanks to all our participants and viewers of today's webcast, including our federal partners who are with us today in person. I think it says a lot about them and their respective agencies for going above and beyond to be here in person today and to be able to work with the CDC and other federal agencies to improve the safe, secure, and efficient importation of critical biological agents. Two of the main goals of the CDC's Import Permit Program is to promote collaborative efforts with our federal partners and also to provide guidance to the regulated community. One of the main things that I emphasize is the guidance to the regulated community. I think that it's definitely important for us to enforce the regulations, but it's also equally important to be able to provide guidance to the regulated community on how to comply with those specific regulations. So I encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity that we have together today by asking any questions or addressing any concerns that you may have with the importation requirements from each specific agency. And we'll do whatever we can within our power to answer those questions today during the question and answer session. I'd like to start with the background information in regards to the vigorous-like agents and toxins. Now, when first person hears the vigorous-like agents toxin, the first thought that comes to mind is, of course, the Federal Silica Agent Program. However, there are actually two programs within that division, one being the Federal Silica Agent Program, and the other one is the CDC's Import Permit Program. Now, the Federal Silica Agent Program regulates all entities that possess, use, or transfer biological agents or toxins that have the potential to pose a severe threat to public health and safety. And that's found under 42 CFR 71.54. Whereas the CDC's Import Permit Program regulates all the importation of infectious biological agents, infectious substances, and vectors capable of causing communicable disease in humans. So that's two different programs that's responsible for enforcing two different regulations. Now, both programs are here to promote laboratory safety and security, and that's done primarily through our inspection programs, and these are inspections that are conducted both domestically and internationally by providing us guidance on the regulations and through training, which is one of the main reasons why we're here today. We also are required to develop biosafety guidance for the regulated community. Now, for the purposes of today's discussion, I'll be focusing mainly on the CDC's Import Permit Program. But I would like to start with the Public Health Service Act, from which the CDC regulations came from. Section 361 of the Public Health Service Act authorizes the Agency Secretary to make and enforce regulations necessary to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of communicable diseases from foreign countries into the United States. It also authorizes the agency secretary to use inspections as a public health measure to ensure that such regulations are carried out. Therefore, the CDC's Import Permit Program assists in protecting the United States public health and safety by ensuring that all imported infectious biological agents, infectious substances, and vectors are imported safely into the United States. It also ensures that appropriate safety measures are in place for the imported infectious agents and also provides oversight to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of communicable diseases from foreign countries into the United States. In 2011, the CDC felt a need to improve its ability to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of communicable disease into the United States. Therefore, on October 14, 2011, CDC published a notice of proposed rulemaking to amend 42 CFR 71.54. And there was also a 60-day comment period for that proposed rulemaking. On February 4, 2013, we published the final rule for those changes, and they became effective on April 5, 2013. Briefly, I would like to share with you some of the changes to the import permit program regulations. The first change is defining of items that require an import permit. Now we define those items such as infectious biological agent, infectious substance, and vector, so you're aware of the types of material that require import permit from our program. We also are ensuring that adequate biosafety measures are in place for the imported material that is received by laboratories throughout the country. We have increased our oversight through inspections. Now, after my presentation, you will hear from Mr. Glenn DeGrew as he provides additional information in regards to the inspection program that was developed last year as a result of the changes to the import permit regulations. Exemptions are listed. And we now define those items that do not require import permit. And we now provide an appeals process for permit applications that are either denied, revoked, or suspended. Now, overall, our main concern is lab safety. Now, we're hopeful that these changes, along with others, would assist in reducing the number of laboratory-acquired infections and also ensure that laboratories importing this material are working with it safely in the laboratory. Types of material that require an import permit. The first type is infectious biological agents. Per the CDC regulations, it is defined as a microorganism, including but not limited to bacteria, including rickettsia, viruses, prions, fungi, protozoa, or other naturally occurring, bioengineered, or artificial, or a component of such microorganism or prion that is capable of causing communicable disease in humans. Now, one thing that you will see throughout my presentation is the phrase capable of causing communicable disease in humans. That's mainly because for the CDC, we issue permits that cause disease in humans and also permits like zoonotic pathogens. That is, those pathogens that cause disease in both humans and animals. The next type is infectious substances, and this is the category where your diagnostic specimens would fall into. And it is defined as any material that is known or reasonably expected to contain an infectious biological agent. Vectors, so that is any animals, vertebrate or invertebrate, including arthropods or any non-infectious self-replicating system, for example, your plasmids or your other molecular vectors, or animal products. All of those require import permit from our program. Additional types of material include your snails. So our main concern with snails is its ability to transmit schistosomiasis. So if you are importing snails into the country, you will be required to seek an import permit from the CDC's Import Permit Program. Also, of course, your non-human primate material and your trophies, unless they have been specifically treated and rendered to be non-infectious. Animals. Any member of the animal kingdom except a human, including an animal product. An example of those includes a mount, rug, or other display item composed of the hide, hair, skull, teeth, bones, or claws in an animal. Arthropods. Any living insect, including crustaceans, spiders, scorpions, etc., capable of being a host or vector of human disease. Types of material that do not require import permit include your diagnostic specimens. Examples of those are samples that are collected from healthy humans. Additional example is diagnostic specimens that have been rendered non-infectious, material that is non-pathogenic to humans, or any non-infectious disease. Or if you're importing a non-infectious material from, for example, your form and fix slides, they will also not require import permit. Select agents. Now, prior to this change, if you were importing a select agent into the country, you were required to have a Form 2 transfer authorization approved by the Federal Select Agent Program and a CDC import permit. Now, with this change, if you're importing a select agent into the country, you're only required to have a Form 2 transfer authorization approved by the Federal Select Agent Program. And we were hopeful that this change will reduce the burden on the public by not requiring them to have two different authorizations from two different programs for the same shipment. A permit is also not required if it's an item that consists of nucleic acid that cannot produce infectious form of any infectious biological agents. Now, examples of those include your DNA from bacteria, your viral nucleic acids that cannot produce any infectious biological agents. Permit is also not required for a product that is cleared, approved, licensed, or otherwise authorized under any of the following laws: the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, Section 351 of the Public Health Service Act pertaining to biological products, or the Virus, Serum, and Toxin Act. Now, if you submit an application to our program and your application has been deemed to not require import permit, you're required to have what we call a certification statement. Now, that certification statement is a detailed description of the material and a statement on official letterhead signed by the sender or the recipient, clearly stating that the material is not known or suspected to contain an infectious biological agent, and how that person making the certification knows that the specimen does not contain an infectious biological agent, or provide a detailed description of how the material was rendered non-infectious. So your shipment should either have an import permit or the certification statement. Or if you're importing a select agent, as I mentioned earlier, you only have to have a Form 2 transfer authorization approved by the Federal Select Agent Program. Date and conditions of the import permit. Now, the CDC import permit is only valid for the time period or term indicated on the permit, and only for as long as the permit conditions continue to be met. Now, one thing to note here is that the issuance date and the expiration date is only the time frame that you allow to import the shipment or to import the material. Now, after that expiration date passes, you're still required to comply with the conditions of that material that you imported into the country as long as it's in your possession. A permit can be denied, revoked, or suspended if the biosafety measures of the permit holder are not commensurate with the hazard posed by the infectious biological agent, infectious substance, or vector, and the level of risk given its intended use, or if the permit holder fails to comply with all conditions, restrictions, and precautions specified in the permit. Now, along with that, you do have the ability to appeal that decision. Any denial, suspension, or revocation of a permit under this section may be appealed to the CDC director, and that appeal must be in writing, of course, and be submitted to the CDC director within 30 calendar days. Now I'd like to shift gears briefly and talk about one of the most important changes that we made to the CDC regulations, and that's our authority to conduct inspections. Now, prior to this change, our process was basically a paper in, paper out process, unfortunately. But now with this change, we're moving from a trust to trust approach more toward a trust but verify approach with the inspection process. Since April of 2013, we've conducted probably about close to 50 inspections, and Mr. DeGrew will go into the inspection program a little bit more detail in the next presentation, and he will also explain to you some of the positives that have resulted in us developing this program and providing oversight to those entities that are not regulated on a consistent basis. As it states here, issuance of a permit may be contingent upon an inspection of the importer's facility by the CDC to evaluate whether the importer's biosafety measures are commensurate with the hazard posed by the infectious biological agent, infectious substance, and/or vector, and the level of risk given its intended use. And lastly, I would like to just share with you briefly our primary partners, most of them who are here today, which Dr. Mueller discussed earlier. I'd just like to highlight CDC, Division of Global Migration and Quarantine, CBP, USDA APHIS, DOT, Department of Transportation, and also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Thank you, and that is my time. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to send those to ipwebcast@cdc.gov, and we will be more than happy to answer those questions during the Q&A session. Thank you again.
Thank you, Vaughn. The next speaker is Glenn DeGrew. He is a senior microbiologist at the Import Permit Program. He is also the Import Permit Inspection Coordinator, subject matter expert. He will walk you through the inspection process as well as provide valuable guidance on what to expect and how to prepare for an import permit inspection. Topic: import permit inspections. Glenn?
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Mueller. And I'll go ahead and start our kind of talk on the import permit inspection program. Section 361 of the Public Health Services Act, 42 U.S.C. 264, authorizes the HHA Secretary to make and enforce regulations necessary to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of communicable diseases into the United States. So when working with materials regulated by 42 CFR 71.54, appropriate biosafety measures must be in place. And for that, to ensure that, you should conduct a risk assessment. And this would help you identify the hazards or the characteristics of an infectious agent, the activities that can result in exposure, and the likelihood that exposure will cause a laboratory-acquired infection, and the likelihood of release in the environment. So when conducting a risk assessment, you should consider the facility where work will be conducted. Evaluate your objectives of work and the PPE that will be required to keep you safe. You also need to manage the risk. And to manage the risk assessment should guide in the selection of the appropriate microbiological practices, safety equipment, and facility safeguards that can prevent exposures and reduce the incidences of laboratory-acquired infections. And this would also aid in ensuring safe possession and use of infectious imported materials. So prior to CDC issuing a permit, the permittee or applicant's facility may be inspected. And this is done to evaluate the importer's biosafety measures. So we look at your facility design to ensure adequate secondary containment. Furthermore, we will evaluate your safety equipment, such as your biosafety cabinets and storage containers, to verify adequate primary containment for the work being conducted. In addition, we will evaluate your standards and special microbiological practices while on site. So we want to verify that the biosafety measures are commensurate with the hazards posed by the infectious biological agent, infectious substance, and or vector imported, and the level of risk given its intended use. So the criteria that's used to determine if an inspection may be required. The first thing we look at is the biosafety level where work will be conducted, and it's all based on risk. Most of our inspections are conducted at BSL 3 level. However, there are some inspections that occur at the BSL 2 level. But to move further, we look at additional information, such as the risk of the agent being imported. If you are conducting work with higher risk agents, such as Mycobacterium tuberculosis, chikungunya virus, yellow fever virus, or any of the novel viruses, such as Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, or influenza H7N9, for example, your application may require an inspection. And to take it a step further, we also look at the work being conducted. If you're conducting higher risk work, such as animal studies with inoculations or aerosol studies, or you're working with large quantities or high concentrations of viruses, your application may require an inspection from our program. You may not be inspected if the laboratory has been inspected by the Federal Select Agent Program. So to expand upon this, if your entity is registered with the Federal Select Agent Program and the laboratory where work will be conducted is also considered registered space, we will not conduct an inspection at your facility. However, if your entity is registered in a laboratory space where work will be conducted is not a registered lab, we may come out and conduct an inspection if you require an import permit from our program. So the initial part of the inspection process is a notification. We'll send out an initial notification via email to the permittee. And when we send that out, it will have the information included that we deem it necessary to conduct an inspection at your facility and that a CDC representative will contact you shortly in the coming days. When we contact you by phone, we'll ask the following questions. We'll discuss a date of the inspection, and we'll also discuss the duration of the inspection. And the duration of the inspection may change because sometimes entities don't list all of the laboratories that may work with the imported material. So depending on the complexity of the laboratories, the safety levels, and the amount of labs that may need to be inspected, it may increase the duration of the inspection. We will also request the following information. We'll request a copy of your biosafety plan. Also, if any personal protective equipment requirements are needed to enter the laboratory. We also would like to have a copy of your laboratory floor plan, any entrance requirements such as PPD testing or any vaccines that we may need to gain entry into the laboratory, as well as directions to the facility. When all that information is gathered, we will send out an official notice of inspection letter. And this letter will include our authority to conduct the inspection date. It would also identify inspectors who will conduct that inspection. And it will list the items that we would like to review while on site. On the first day of our inspection, we'll have a brief introductions period, and inspectors usually explain the purpose of our visit and give background information. And also, the entity usually provides an overview of the work being conducted. After that meeting, we'll begin our laboratory tours. So what to expect during inspections? We like to have a knowledgeable representative to guide inspectors during a site visit. We usually have lots of questions. We'll have questions directed at the applicant, at the laboratory, as well as non-laboratory staff during the inspection. And we'll review policies and procedures such as your donning and doffing procedures. We'll make sure that the appropriate signage is posted at the appropriate location. We'll also evaluate your waste handling procedures, any training conducted, and your spill procedures. We also look at your biosafety cabinet certification, verifying that the following tests were performed by the certifying organization, such as HEPA filter leak testing for any biosafety cabinet. Testing of Class 2 cabinets, we'll review and make sure the certifying body looked at downflow velocity, face velocity, and as well as airflow smoke patterns. For Class 2 Type A1 biosafety cabinets, a cabinet integrity test should be performed if the cabinet is new, have been moved, or panels have been removed from maintenance. For Class 2 Type A1 and A2 BSCs, they should be either recirculating or thimble connected, and we usually smoke the thimble to ensure it is negatively pressurized to the room. We also conduct an inspection of your HVAC facilities when looking at BSL-3 and ABSL-3 laboratories to verify the laboratory has a ducted air ventilation system. We inspect the exhaust fans, associated ductwork, and any exhaust air filtration systems, discussing preventative maintenance, frequency of filter changes, and decontamination procedures. So while we're doing an HVAC inspection, we like to meet with the most knowledgeable facilities personnel, and we'll ask more specific questions such as which supply and exhaust fans serve containment areas, if they serve other areas, or redundant exhaust fans present, and if any power failure testings are performed. We'll ask that a location be made available for inspectors to review documentation, discuss findings, and complete respective checklists. So as a recap, we'll review laboratory practices and procedures conducted to ensure proper biosafety measures are in place. We'll look at your annual biosafety cabinet certifications, HEPA filter certifications, and your BSL-3 design and operational parameter re-verification records. At this time, I'd like to inform everyone that the Division of Select Agents and Toxins recognizes the CDC NIH publication, Biosafety and Microbiological and Biomedical Laboratories, more commonly known as the BMBL, as a national biosafety standard, and accordingly, the entity must consider this guidance found in the BMBL when developing its biosafety measures. So other practices and procedures we review in BSL-3 labs are practices to ensure procedures are performed to minimize the creation of splashes and aerosols. We look at hand washing procedures, your decontamination and waste handling procedures, procedures for proper use of biosafety cabinet, and a proper use of PPE. In addition, hands-free and automatically operated sinks were required. We look for the availability of eye wash stations, and the use and availability of autoclaves, and a ducted air ventilation system for BSL-3 laboratories. So after the inspection is conducted, we'll have a closeout meeting, and this will be used to inform the entity of any deficiencies that we cite on the inspection report. This will be an opportunity to gain further insight regarding the inspection deficiencies or any other aspect of the inspection, and a final opportunity to ask us any additional questions, such as questions regarding the inspection or questions regarding the import permit application process. The inspection report. This is a report that will be emailed to the permittee in 1 or 2 weeks following an inspection. The report will include our observations noted during the inspection and a request for further information. A written response to the report should be provided to CDC via email within 2 weeks. So the inadequate response letter is a letter written by CDC as a response to items that are deemed inadequate on the inspection report. It's sent to the entity via email within 1 to 2 weeks, and a response is required addressing this report within 2 weeks. So to avoid an inadequate response letter, you want to provide adequate and concise responses to each specific observation. Responses can include pictures or any form of documentation. You can always contact the inspection team, as we're here to help in any way necessary. Finally, the adequate response letter will be sent when all information is captured, and it will signify that the report is closed and no further information is required. To date, Import Permit Inspection Team has completed 47 inspections. We've inspected BSL-2 and Animal BSL-2 laboratories, as well as Arthropod Containment Level 2, Biosafety Level 3, and Animal Biosafety Level 3 laboratories. Common descriptions of work associated with inspections have been human diagnostic testing, animal studies, and molecular biology research. Most common agents, the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, both multi-drug resistant and extensively drug resistant strains, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, chikungunya virus, and prions. Common safety standard departures. We've seen lots of issues with donning and doffing procedures, mixing of clean and dirty areas, visitor training, where individuals enter the laboratory not informed of the hazards of the agents, signage posted without all the information regarding the safety standard, infectious materials stored inadequately with inadequate containers that are not able to be decontaminated, and facility re-verifications not being performed. We've had one compliance inspection. It's based on an anonymous complaint. CDC inspectors visited as an unannounced. Biosafety concerns were noted, such as inappropriate signage of infectious materials, issues with entry and exit procedures, and alarms not functioning properly. We provided them a compliance inspection report, and all departures were addressed adequately. We've had 2 changes where work were conducted with imported materials. 2 entities were informed of the inspection requirement. Prior to initiation of the inspection, CDC were informed of the issues below. Entity 1, biosafety cabinets not able to meet certification standards. Issues with laboratory exhaust flow, and the laboratory was shut down. Entity 2, issues with HVAC system not maintaining negative airflow. These problems were rectified by Entity 1 working with imported materials being moved to a laboratory previously inspected by the Import Permit Program, and an inspection was no longer required by our program. Entity 2 worked with imported materials and moved to a select agent registered laboratory. Therefore, an inspection was not required by our program. So this is an example of the positive impact of the CDC Import Permit Inspection Program by preventing work being conducted within a facility not meeting the nationally recognized safety standards of the BMBL. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Our next speaker is Susan Loring. She is a microbiologist and facilities specialist at the Division of Select Agents and Toxins. She will talk about the verification requirements that an entity is expected to perform and document for a BSL-3 or ABSL-3. Susan?
Hello, everyone. My topic today is the performance of HVAC verification tests for BSL-3 and ABSL-3 areas. Here's an outline of the points I'll be covering: why HVAC tests should be done, which scenarios are required, different ways that the test can be performed, important information that should be recorded, what is considered a passing test result, and examples of how 2 different laboratories might have performed the tests. So first of all, why should HVAC failure tests be performed? There was some significant new language in the 5th edition of the BMBL stating that BSL-3 and ABSL-3 level facilities shall be designed such that under failure conditions, the airflow will not be reversed. The performance of HVAC failure test is a means to confirm that at a specific facility, the HVAC system design is capable of preventing an airflow reversal under failure conditions. The three failure conditions which are required to be performed are loss of a single exhaust fan serving the laboratory, normal power failure, and the return to normal power conditions from failure. There are many other HVAC system components which could fail, but these are the ones that are the most likely to happen, which could be expected to possibly produce an airflow reversal. For exhaust fan failure testing, facilities that are equipped with exhaust fan redundancy, it could be done that multiple exhaust fans are failed at the same time, but this is not a requirement. A much more likely failure event would be loss of a single exhaust fan serving the area. For example, by the loss of an exhaust fan belt for belt-driven fans or a fan motor. For power failure restart testing, facilities that are equipped with an emergency power backup generator could perform the test by doing a load switch from utility power to generator with the return to normal power. For facilities that are not served by a backup generator, the test could be performed by shutting off the building power and then turning the building power back on. This is not, however, a requirement. The reason that actual building power failure is not required to be performed is that it can have a disruptive effect on other occupants to the building and because of potential hazards to electrical components. Another option for performing the test is to simulate the effect of the loss of normal power to the supply and exhaust fans serving the lab by shutting those fans off simultaneously, and then simulating the return to normal power by simultaneously turning both the supply and exhaust fans on. Some important information that needs to be captured in the test results is the specifics on the test being performed. For example, what component of the HVAC system was failed, such as failure test of exhaust fan 1 is very explicit. The floor plan monitoring points also should be identified, and this is especially important for multi-room containment suites. And this can simply be clearly stated, such as clean corridor to lab anteroom results. And then the observations that are made should be clearly recorded, such as airflow observations between a lab and its anteroom, or the room differential pressure trend readings collected over time. You should try to record the results so that anyone can understand what test was being performed and what happened. Airflow observations can be made by a witness outside the laboratory while someone uses a smoke stick inside the lab or dry ice in a container of water at the base of the closed laboratory room door. It is preferable to do airflow observation using smoke or vapor as opposed to relying on a paper telltale strip, because visualizing the air with smoke or vapor allows you not only to see the airflow direction, but also to some extent how far the air flows if it should exit the laboratory. Well, what is considered a passing test result? A facility would be considered to pass the test if, under a failure condition, by one means or another, it can be verified that air that originates within the laboratory room does not cross the containment boundary. The containment boundary varies with the facility floor plan. So we're going to look at a single room BSL-3 laboratory with an anteroom that is entered from a clean corridor. The containment boundary for this floor plan is the door between the clean corridor and the BSL-3 anteroom. So this space would be considered to pass a failure test if it can be shown that air that originates within the BSL-3 laboratory room does not flow through the anteroom and exit into the clean corridor. So this is our hypothetical laboratory 1 example. Some additional information about this laboratory are that it has a single dedicated exhaust fan and a supply air handler that's the same one that serves supply air to the entire building. The visual means of confirming inward airflow is a paper telltale strip hanging from the lab door frame. The personnel at Lab 1 did the exhaust fan and normal power failure tests by using airflow observation with smoke sticks at the base of the outer anteroom door and a witness inside the anteroom. They also wrote a narrative of the test performed. And this can be easily done just by stating what happened. We failed the exhaust fan on a certain date while so-and-so observed the airflow in the anteroom, and another person used a smoke stick in the clean corridor at the base of the anteroom door. And then the results that were obtained by the witness are recorded. Now, the test should begin under normal conditions, and that's what meant by baseline on this trend. And then the witness observations are recorded at regular intervals. This requires some coordination between the person who is interrupting the power for the exhaust fan and the person that's doing that. The test should not end before that fan has stopped completely. Well, here's example 2. This one is a slightly more complicated facility, a small multi-room BSL-3 containment suite. This space has an L-shaped containment corridor that's designated as K on the floor plan, and it provides access via single doors to 3 BSL-3 laboratories that are on the bottom of the floor plan, going from left to right, rooms L, M, and N. Laboratory 2 has a slightly more sophisticated design. It has dedicated redundant exhaust fans, a dedicated supply air handler unit, and Laboratory 2 has pressure gauges at each of the lab room doors which communicate to the building automation system. A building automation system, or BAS, is like a computer that monitors and may control parts of the building function as far as temperature or air pressure. They vary a great deal in their capabilities. The ones for Laboratory 2 is able to capture and store pressure trend readings over time. So the entity personnel for Laboratory 2 did the same exhaust fan and power failure restart tests, but they used their BAS to capture the pressure readings over time and then provided those as a graph. So this graph shows on the horizontal axis time collected once a minute, and the vertical axis is differential pressure for the rooms in inches of water column. And each of these trend lines, which is in a different color, is the pressure of that point on the floor plan over time. And the entity personnel would have to also write a narrative of the time that different test events were happening. This is a power failure restart test, and it looks to me like the test began with the power failure, so there's no actual normal point here, unless if those were the readings when the power failure first began at 8 a.m. The pressure readings rise close to neutral. One reading goes slightly above neutral. Then the generator kicks on and the pressure readings come back down. Around 8:10, it looks like they return to normal power. When pressure readings are collected over time like this, they should be done at least every 2 minutes, preferably once a minute, because air can travel quite a distance in a minute. This is a very brief overview of HVAC failure tests. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have about this during the general question and answer session. Thank you.
We are going to switch to presentations. Instead of Dr. Adam Langer, Dr. Miranda Bradley will present what is new with the Import Permit Program. Dr. Bradley?
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to talk to you about what is new with CDC Import Permit Program. Over the past year, we've had several changes and new and exciting things happening, and they fall into 2 very broad categories. The first one is dealing with policies, and we published our first policy on our website. You can find it there. The Import Permit Program published a statement back in September of 2013, and it is dealing with the following statement. The issuance and expiration dates listed on your CDC import permit are only applicable during the window of time of which an import permit holder may actually import the infectious biological agent, infectious substance, and vectors listed on the import permit in the United States. The conditions also for the importation and continued possession of the listed agents remain in effect as long as the importer is in possession of the imported material. And this is published on our website. The rest of our new changes are, believe it or not, fall up underneath the category dealing with our application. In the application last year, we revised the application. There were 3 major changes dealing in Section A, which is dealing with the permittee themselves, the person who is requesting the permit. In Section E, which is the application part that deals with the description of the actual biological agent that you want to import, and in Section G, which is the biosafety measures. I will be highlighting in each one of these sections what is new and tips on how to deal with each one of these sections of the application. In Section A, this is a person who is requesting the permit. Note that this person should be from the United States who is requesting the permit application. And the main thing is here, I didn't highlight this, but in Section A, item number 5, this address, the physical address, should actually be the address where you're going to import the material and also work on the material. If you're not working on the material, then where you will be storing the material. It should not be a residence. The other part that's new is the secondary contact information. We've got a lot of confusion over that. The secondary contact person that you list here is not a permittee. They will not be listed on the permit. They serve as a contact for us to deal with the actual process of getting the application and the permit through the process. So this information here is highlighted. It's just a secondary person. It's not an actual authorized permittee in Section A. In Section E, the description of the infectious biological agents, this section here, what we're mainly looking at in E, item number 4, is we do want the scientific name of the agent. That includes the genus and the species of what's going to be imported. Now, for non-human primate material that is not rendered non-infectious, it has to be an agent that is put here, not the name of the genus and species of the non-human primate. I'll go back over that again later on in the slide, but it needs to be a genus and a species and not include a family name or a group of viruses. If it's not a genus and species, put a viral name. In Section E, item number 5, the strain designation, you can put not applicable. What we're looking for here, if you know the strain designation, you can put it there. With influenza strains, we are in particular looking for the hemagglutinin and the neuraminidase numbers to go into this particular designated area. Sections 6 through 8 have to be filled out. We also have a new database, and leaving blanks will cause an issue. So those can't be left blank. We really do need that as well for inspection purposes, which Mr. DeGrue talked about earlier. We need to know where they're going to be housed and what building, what room number as well. And we also need to know the person responsible. And listed in Section A, it should be the organization listed in Section A as the person responsible for the imported material and the research going on in the lab or the storage of the material. In addition, we also have the continuation form of Section E, so you can list as many of the agents as you'd like on your permit. It looks identical. Section G is a new section on biosafety measures that we look at as well. A lot of it looks familiar, numbers 1, 2, and 3. What's changed in here is section number 4, section G, item number 4, has the permitting implemented biosafety measures commensurate with the hazard posed by the infectious biological agent, substance, or vector being imported. And what we're looking at here is this should be a yes. If you haven't got a biosafety plan in already, then you may want to, because we are doing inspections now, and one of the first things we ask is for the biosafety plans when we do prior to doing inspections. So that's pretty much what's new with the application in sections A, E, and G. And the most exciting part that I like is that we have a new customer interfaced web-based application that's coming out. It will be available to you hopefully Halloween, October 31st, a week from now. This web-based application can be used on your smartphone, and I'm going to take a few minutes now to demonstrate this web-based application. So if you'll notice, most of my slides have focused on the biological agent application, but we actually have two applications that you can apply for. The first one is the biological agents, which the majority of our permits are for, but we also have one for bats as well. For demo purposes, I will just be going through the biological agents tab here. So the first step is you are going to click which type of application you want, and we're going to do the biological agents. The things that you note in red are just for will not be there when you actually get this application on the web based on Friday. This is just in the demo stages now. So if you'll notice, it's the same application listed on the left-hand side, sections A through G, listed there. And what you're going to do is click on each one of these. I'm going to walk you straight through it. We're going to go to Next. And this is section A, where we've already talked about the person who's actually applying for the permit. And we're going to add a new person, a new permitting. And when you do this, I'm going to put in here, we'll put in here John Doe, just to demonstrate it. Caps are on. I'll leave it there. Okay, and you'll notice each time I'm typing in here, it turns green and then it turns red. What it's going to do, green means that it's good. You filled in the field correctly with the information. You can go on and you can actually save it. We're going to go down to the next one. Permittee's last name, let's say it's John. And this is just a normal application. We'll do a middle name, organization. And you'll notice what's popping up on the side each time as I'm going through it are the guidance for each one of these items as I put them in, telling you what should go into these fields. And this is a physical address that I was stressing last time that I'm stopping on. So let's say they're from 123 CDC Street. This needs to be, again, I'm reiterating, this needs to be an actual physical address where the imported material will be worked on, not a residence. And then if we skip one of these, let's say I keep skipping down to here, you get all the way down, it's the same information all the way down to the secondary contact. What happens, we'll fill in here with the permittee. In blocks 1 through 3, be the courier. We'll put yes or no. It allows you to do that. But you'll notice, because I didn't fill in the fields, what I want you to notice is there's a stop there on the save. I can't save anything, so it's actually forcing you to fill in the fields that are needed for each one of these. Okay? So I'm just going to put fill in a city just to keep going with the next section. And also, I want you to note on the email address, even though I skipped it, if you do not put a legitimate email address, you'll notice until I fill the correct part of an email address, it needs to be something with CDC, Gov, Yahoo, Gmail. Otherwise, it will not recognize it as an email address, and you'll keep getting it. It'll still be red, and you won't be able to save the information. There we go. Not until you put a correct one for the email will it actually let you save it. And that's what I wanted to point out on that one. So it is, and then I have to fill out all of this other stuff as well. So it's forcing you to go through and to actually put in meaningful information. For both the email addresses of the primary person as well as the secondary. And now you can actually save this. And when you save it, this is saved for the moment, but if you go out of this web site, you've lost the information. So make sure once you sit down to do the application, whether you're on your phone, your smartphone, or whether you're on a computer, take the time and actually go all the way through the application, or you'll lose all the information that you've just entered. And as you'll notice, all the continuation forms in Section A, if we want to add another permittee, we can do that here as well. Also on this pencil that's noted here. If we need to go back and edit any information, we can. We can enter information in any of these fields at this stage, or we can go ahead and save it and go to the next one. We can also trash it as well. The next section, Section B, is the sender. It works very similar to Section A that I just took a while going through. Very similar. This section is your sender, and it should be a foreign address that we put in here. And with a postal code. If a postal code is not applicable, you can put NA in here. Otherwise, I think if you don't put anything, it's not going to allow you to save. Okay? The next section, Section C, is a shipment information. On the shipment information, you'll notice you can put commercial or hand carry, both of them. With hand carrying, we do want the person who's going to actually be hand carrying on here. Note that we do not condone hand carrying of infectious biological agents, but that name will go there. You can do a single or multiple shipment. With multiple shipments, we do want the number of shipments that will be shipped in. And all of this is pretty much the same as a regular application here. And then with the anticipated port of entry, you can start typing, and you'll notice that there is a list of ports that will come up, and you can select from the ports that are automatically, that are already in there, and it'll be inserted in. And then you can add another port if you'd like. We'll put Camden. And you can also remove ports as well. Okay? And the final destination, this is an area where we're talking about your collaborators within the United States that we're looking for. What's different about this than our current application is you'll notice all of the information is here, but we're not asking for the biosafety levels that are found in the continuation page. All we're asking for is their name, organization and address, and phone and fax and email address. There's no continuation page with Section D like you have in the paper form anymore with the web-based. In the next section, Section E, this is a biological agent. It looks very similar to the form that we have now. You can click any of these. All of these can be clicked multiple or just one of them. With other, be sure to give us a description of what other is for the intended use of the imported agent. This right here, this field is the same one we have. Please provide detailed description of the work to be accomplished with the imported agent. And with all of these fields, you can write as much as you want to. I don't think there is a limit on the characters on this. And then what we're doing with the agents, you add a new agent and you want to put the scientific name, the genus, and the species. And this is a populated list as well. And let's say we're looking for Escherichia coli, then you can choose from any of these. If your agent is not there, you can actually add it as well. Let's say we put apnea, and that's not an agent that's on our list currently, and you can add it as a new agent. Okay? With the non-human primates, if we want to add another agent with a non-human primate, the one that we're using and recommend, well, I know a lot of people are putting that they're non-infectious, but if you haven't rendered them non-infectious, what we recommend is putting herpes simian B virus in as the agent, or whatever agent that the non-human primate may have if you know of another agent. So for here, let's say herpes simplex virus, you can add as many agents as you'd like on this one. So for those, I know one of the questions we're going to get is we have these long list of agents. You're going to have to add them all in using this system here. But it's still a great system, still love it. Strain designation, we've already talked about this. You can put not applicable, or you can put the strain designation like H1N1. Building location, room number, all that is, nothing's changed on there. And then you can save it. I'll move on to the next section, section F, the material. The source of the material is pretty much a checklist here that's very similar to the current application. This field here where you provide detailed description of the material containing the biological agent, again, it expands. I don't think there's a limit in the number of characters that you can put in here. And then does the material, this is a question that we get overlooked a lot of times because it's small. Does it contain animal products or byproducts? We use this field for actually coding the permit, and it's very important that this one is actually filled out. It's a yes or no question. Okay? And then the last one is the biosafety. And with the biosafety, it's identical. It's a checklist here. And then a yes/no question this is the new part here, has the permitting implemented biosafety measures commensurate with the hazard posed by the infectious biological agent. And then on section 5, the anticipated disposition of the biological agent. Will it be destroyed? When you click that up, it automatically asks you what method will it be destroyed, by thermal. It will ask for the description like autoclaving. If it's chemical, it'll ask for the chemical description, irradiation, what type of irradiation. If it's other, you can explain that as well. So I'm very excited about the new web-based application process. At the end, there's a signature here. You put your name and the date. Over here is a calendar where you can put today's date in. And once you submit this application, you will get a copy of what you've actually filled out, emailed to, I'm assuming, the primary permitting, so that you have it for future reference. And you also get an email telling you whether or not what you've submitted in the application will be approved, has been approved or denied. And at that stage, it goes back to the normal technical review, and everything's back to normal. So I'm very excited. I think it's a great thing for our program that we're moving more towards paperless. So that concludes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. We have a little change in the schedule. Instead of Dr. Langer, Dr. Robert Mullen is going to speak about importation of selected live animals and animal products.
Well, thank you, and I'm here to talk to you this afternoon about some of the activities of my team, which is the Importations and Animal Contact team. And we are part of a larger division like everyone else at CDC. And my division is the Quarantine and Border Health Services branch, whose mission it is to protect U.S. communities from global disease threats. This division supports our mission by preventing the introduction and spread of communicable diseases, enhancing federal, state, and industry partnerships, and enforcing public health regulations. In terms of our role in import permits, we issue permits and letters of permission for selected animals, live animals, and for some animal products. The enforcement of these regulations occurs at the U.S. ports of entry, that is to say, the CDC quarantine stations, as well as with our partners from other parts of the government, Customs and Border Protection, USDA, and others involved. We have restrictions on certain categories of live animals that can come into the country. These include the family Viverridae, civets, and related animals. Freshwater turtles, tortoises, and terrapins less than 4 inches in length, and that also includes viable eggs. Non-human primates, and African rodents. We restrict the importation of certain animal products, which include products from the family Viverridae, non-human primates, and African rodents. Other live animals and animal products may be restricted by CDC by the Import Permit Program, for example, bats and certain species of snails, which you've heard earlier. We restrict members of the family Viverridae based on the occurrence of an outbreak of severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, in 2002 and 2003. In this outbreak, civets were linked to this transmission and to the outbreak. We imposed an emergency embargo in January of 2004, and these animals are still covered under that embargo. This embargo includes all members of the family Viverridae, which is to say genets, linsangs, binturongs, and civets, except for the African palm civet. It applies both to live animals and to animal products. However, products may be imported without a permit if they have been rendered non-infectious and are accompanied by a statement so stating that. Permission letters are provided after an application for importation of these products or live animals. We allow entry for these live animals or products only for science, education, or exhibition. If you want to submit a request for a letter of permission, you can do so by emailing the address at the bottom of the slide. As noted, we also restrict the importation of certain freshwater turtles, tortoises, and terrapins. And this is due to outbreaks of salmonella infection occurring among children who were in contact with these small, generally pet turtles. For commercial purposes, turtles with a carapace of greater than 4 inches may not be imported, and viable turtle eggs may not be imported. And this is for commercial purposes. For non-commercial purposes, that is to say pets or other non-commercial purposes, an individual may import up to 6 viable eggs or live turtles with a carapace of less than 4 inches. Any more than 6 of either of these items would require a permission letter from our branch. These regulations do not apply to sea turtles, and once these animals are inside the country, turtles less than 4 inches become subject to further FDA restrictions. And again, an email address is noted there for you to make application for your permission letter. CDC has a long history of regulating the importation of non-human primates. It goes back to the 50s and was further strengthened in 1990 following an outbreak of Ebola, which happened in the United States in Virginia. As a result of continuing confusion about the requirements for importing non-human primates, we undertook a rulemaking process in 2013, which resulted in revised regulations being issued in February of that year. The outbreak that led to this first strong set of regulations in 1990 was a viral hemorrhagic fever that occurred in a group of imported non-human primates. The investigators first thought that this was due to a simian hemorrhagic fever, and the illness spread to the monkeys at the facility, at which time the facility was depopulated and about 500 animals were euthanized. As a result of that outbreak, 6 people seroconverted to Ebola. However, there was no signs and symptoms or human illness associated with this outbreak. For importing live non-human primates, we require that a CDC registration be obtained. Again, these animals may only be brought into the country for purposes of science, education, or exhibition. And there is, again, the email address which you can contact us at to make any kind of inquiries. We impose strict procedures for shipping these animals and transporting them from the port of entry to the quarantine facility. After their arrival at the quarantine facility, they undergo at least a 31-day quarantine period, during which time they're observed for signs of illness, infection. Primarily, we're interested in tuberculosis and the hemorrhagic fevers, but other things are looked at for as well, such things as measles, yellow fever, gastrointestinal bacterial diseases, things that may be of a zoonotic nature. We periodically inspect all of our registered quarantine facilities, of which there are currently 24. This is a picture of what one might have seen prior to implementation of the 1990 regulations. And you can see that basically there's a, let's see here, I'll grab this. Somebody bringing in some monkey crates here and here, and they're all a jumble with all sorts of other kinds of cargo. That would not happen under today's regulations. They are almost universally palletized, so that you can see here there are about 7 or 8 crates here on a pallet, and they're handled as one single kind of entity and not handled separately. Regarding non-human primate products, these may include tissues or samples from a non-human primate, such things as trophies or souvenirs, diagnostic or scientific samples, or other things. And for these, a CDC import permit is required. A CDC permit is not required, however, if these items have been rendered non-infectious. And such a shipment must be accompanied by a statement that tells how the products were rendered non-infectious. And we have a list of methods to ensure that non-infectiousness is achieved on our website. African rodents restrictions occurred as a result of an outbreak of monkeypox in 2003 in the United States. This outbreak was linked to African rodents being imported for the pet trade. In this outbreak, a total of 71 human cases of monkeypox were investigated, and these were the first human cases of monkeypox reported outside of Africa. At that time, we issued an immediate embargo and domestic ban, and that became effective on June 11th of 2003. Later on, the international import embargo was codified as a regulation under 42 CFR 71.56. This was a joint interim final rule that was issued by both CDC and FDA. FDA, however, vacated their parts of the interim final rule, which regarded domestic transportation of these rodents, in September of 2008. The CDC restrictions still are in place. This embargo includes all African rodents, anything imported directly from Africa, or all rodents who are born outside of Africa, but who are indigenous to Africa. It applies not only to live animals, but animal products as well. Again, if the products have been rendered non-infectious, they can come in without a permit. And the same restrictions apply in terms of being allowed entry only for science, education, or exhibition. As I noted earlier, the CDC staffs quarantine stations at certain U.S. ports of entry. And again, we do this in conjunction with our federal partners, and our goal is to execute our authority for quarantine isolation and communicable disease surveillance. Here is the current state of our quarantine stations. There are 20 of them, and as you can see, they involve the major shipping, trading, and passenger hubs in the country, as well as some of the borders. The country is broken down into regions so that a quarantine station can manage subports and other smaller importation points as part of their duties. So we provide support to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and we, as I've said, coordinate with other federal, state, and local agencies. We make entry decisions on CDC-regulated imports, and we coordinate with the CDC Import Permit Program to ensure that CDC-restricted imports have proper permits or documentation. If you need assistance with any kind of question that involves importation through one of our ports of entry, you can find the point of contact information on our website as noted here on the slide. Or you can get in contact with any member of my team. So I think that concludes my prepared talk for today.
Thank you, Dr. Mullen. We are going to take a break, 15-minute break, and the next speaker I will introduce later. Thank you so much.